Hi everyone, you're watching the Haider Rifaat Show and I'm your host Haider Rifaat. In today's exclusive episode, I've invited Hamzah Rifaat. He is a broadcast journalist, he's a newscaster at PTV World, as well as a columnist for CGTN, China Global Television Network. Today we'll be discussing the rape pandemic that's happening in Pakistan. It's not something new, we've been hearing about it for I don't know how many years now, maybe perhaps even decades. And the recent Motorway-Sialkot and Lahore motorways incident has really caused an outrage amongst many feminists, many people in Pakistan. They have been rallying as well. But why now? That's the main question that I'll be asking Hamzah, who is with me right now. Thank you so much, Hamzah, for joining me. It's a pleasure having you on the show. First and foremost, I want to ask you, should rapists be publicly hanged in Pakistan?
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me on the show and highlighting this rather pressing and disturbing incident that took place. It shook the entire country. Look, I'm in favor of capital punishment. I'm also in favor of punishment which varies by jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Rapists definitely do get a prison sentence. I mean, I can quote the example of Singapore, where anyone who is convicted of rape would get a minimum sentence of 20 years of imprisonment along with 12 rounds of caning, which is a legal punishment in Singapore. And, rapists have different punishments which vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Now, in Pakistan's case, where we already have the death penalty for the blasphemy law, we should also have death penalty for crimes against humanity. Rape is an egregious and deplorable crime. It violates the sanctity of life, and proper punishment must also be meted out to the perpetrator for conducting this act. So I am in favor of capital punishment. I am definitely in favor of hanging as well. I do have my differences with private and public hanging. I think if it's done privately and if with extensive amount of, you could say, in closed doors, if it actually takes place in closed doors, that would be far more better as compared to public hanging. Public hanging sends a very disturbing message to the masses, especially when women and children are watching this, even though the person who committed this terrible crime deserves nothing less. So I'm definitely in favor of the death penalty, but I would slightly dispute whether a rapist should actually be publicly hanged.
Often in Pakistan, Hamzah, we know that the rape victims are especially blamed for not being able to, for example, this motorway incident that took place recently of a mother, she shouldn't have been traveling at such an hour. So do you think that victim blaming needs to stop now?
Heather, allow me to express my outrage at the CCPO's remarks regarding the victim. I mean, let me be very clear. You are tasked with providing security to every single citizen of Pakistan, regardless of the gender, regardless of the age. And if that woman, who apparently was pleading for help with 2 kids, she gets, she becomes brutalized in the middle of the night. And then the CCPO comes up and says that she shouldn't be driving on this side of the road, and this is not France and everything of that sort. It is absolutely disgusting, and it deserves to be condemned in the strongest of words, because the CCPO's responsibility is to provide security and protection. It is to nab down these, I wouldn't even call them animals. They're not animals. Animals also have compassion. These are, I don't know what to call them. Whatever these things are, you need to nab them down. You need to hunt them down. You need to bring them to justice. And then after a proper trial with the DNA samples basically match, that is when you met out the strictest and severest of punishments. But that has not happened in this case. That has not happened in this motorway gang rape case. What has happened is this poor woman who was psychologically damaged after this incident, poor 2 kids who were seeing their mother's body ravaged in the middle of the night. What she was told was that, look, you're not supposed to come out at this time. You're not supposed to be driving in this area because it's not safe. This is absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous and worth condemning. So victim blaming and victim shaming needs to stop. It is a manner in which you basically want to deflect blame, because frankly, this has been an administrative failure on part of the Punjab police as well as the Punjab law enforcement agencies. This is also a moral and societal failure because we have not been able to educate our masses as to what respecting women is all about. We live in the 21st century. Women are even allowed to drive in a country like Saudi Arabia, but in Pakistan, when such an incident takes place, the CCPO has the audacity to come on television and start victim shaming. This is absolutely disgusting. And I personally believe that this man should be removed. He already has corruption cases against him. But on this very statement, if the PTI government has any meat in it and it stands for justice, this man should be removed immediately.
Yes, and I think it's a complete law enforcement failure because there was nobody there to basically look after that woman. And I believe that these services really need to improve for the better in Pakistan. Very lastly, Hamzah, I wanted to ask you about Imran Khan's recent remarks where he said that the rapists should be chemically castrated or they should be also publicly hanged. So which of these two is he really talking about? Will it be both chemically castrated rapist, or will it be, the person being publicly hanged? Which one of it is it really? And what do you make of this overall? What is your analysis on Prime Minister Imran Khan's remarks?
Look, I happened to come across his interview where he mentioned that these rapists should be castrated and should also be given capital punishment. While I do understand where his sentiment is coming from as the Prime Minister and the Chief Executive of the country, it's one thing coming up with words, and it's quite the other as far as backing them up with actions is concerned. Let's be very honest, the CCPO has not been removed. Yet you're coming on television and you're telling the Pakistani public that these rapists should be castrated. So there's a slight, with all due respect, he is the Prime Minister of the country. I don't want to be hypercritical of him. But to be very honest, there's this tinge of hypocrisy in what he's trying to say here. Because if you, first things first, the person who was responsible for ensuring the security of this woman has come up with a controversial statement. That person should be removed. There have been sitting ministers in the Prime Minister's cabinet who have not necessarily condoled what the CCPO has said, but have urged the public to be silent. Why should the public be silent on such a matter, where you're resorting to victim blaming? Coming back to the sentences which are to be awarded, castration, yes, if it becomes a matter of law for that to happen, you need to pass legislation through the parliament. Pakistan is a democracy. You need to pass legislation through the parliament. If the two-thirds majority of the parliament agrees with the fact that castration should be considered as the adequate punishment for rapists, then yes, well and good. Capital punishment can also be called out through a presidential decree as well. We've already seen it with the anti-terrorism courts. So it definitely is possible. But the fact remains the biggest challenge is implementing castration and implementing capital punishment. I am basically in favor of capital punishment instead of castration because capital punishment ensures speedy justice. It acts as an effective deterrent for future rapists. Because you see, the problem in Pakistan is the fact that there's so much of lawlessness. There are people who are, perpetrators. This person who carried out the rape, at least one of the persons, at least one of the people, he had a rape case which was on him since 2013. So it brings up this question: what happened to the previous case? Why was he allowed out, and why was he allowed to commit this egregious act out in broad, during the nighttime? So the fact remains that these are questions that need to be answered. The entire Pakistani justice system has so many loopholes that a person commits a crime, somebody comes in, he or she gives out, bails that person out, and then that person is free to commit more crimes. There needs to be a deterrent. People in Pakistan are afraid of committing blasphemy because they know they would become liable to the death penalty. Why not have a similar sort of punishment as a deterrent? Because rapists would think twice, thrice, or even think 10 times before committing such an act because they know that there is an effective, credible deterrent. So I am in favor of capital punishment. Castration all right if it can be passed through legislation, but I find that very difficult to implement. And frankly, this incident, I'm sorry, Heather, I'm taking much of your time, but this incident came under the watch of the Punjab government. The Punjab government is being, the PTI is at the center in Punjab. It is the PTI's responsibility to legislate, to come up with adequate laws, to come up with credible deterrence.
Great. Thank you so much, Hamzah. It was a pleasure having you on the show. This is indeed a very sad topic and a tragic one. But I think the end authority lies with the Prime Minister, the government, the law enforcement agencies, and the dysfunctional system that really needs to be revamped. What do you think? Whether this public punishment when it comes to hanging, that needs to be materialized or not? Leave a comment below and let me know. And until then, take care. Allah Hafiz.